So to first kick us off, I just have one early on question here that I wanted to ask. So, in your view, can you give us the lay of the land with regards to artificial intelligence today? I was looking up some statistics recently, and essentially I saw in 2014 that there were 664 million AI applications at that point in time. Now there's 6.7 billion AI applications in 2021. And what I thought was maybe why don't we go first to Mark with this question and ask that you just give us your perspective in terms of where do you think we stand today?
I think, obviously that's an amazing statistic for a start, right? Um, it depends how many of those are actually, being applied and being productive and being useful. I think that's what it comes down to, right? And I think certainly throughout my career, it's always been a case of, well, there's an awful lot of hype around machine learning and AI in general. How do we translate that into actually something that's useful? And I think that's you know where we are today. And I think since the last probably 3 to 5 years, we've seen a convergence that really makes the possibility of really using AI and it being a benefit to life sciences a reality. And that convergence really comes down to really good algorithms, right? That we, that really push the boundaries of what machines learning can be. We have a rise in we are almost unlimited computing power at our disposal. When I first started doing machine learning, you had to put a specific processor board inside your PC to even train the network. Um, but that's a long time ago. That's like the 1980s, right? And then we also have an explosion in data generation, right? So we from high throughput platforms like next generation sequencing, but also from the digitization of healthcare, we really do have those three things. Um, I think along with that probably comes a fourth aspect, which is governance and ethics. And I know we may get into that a little bit later on, but I think also there's a realization that it is going to come. It is going to play a very important part of our future in healthcare, and therefore we need, to give it that convergence, which allows us to do things that are really useful. We also have to think of how we how we govern, how we build these algorithms, so we don't build them with bias in and so on. So I think we're at a really interesting spot, and that I think the hype is to a certain extent justified if we can find the right applications or the applications that are going to make the most impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, again, to go back to that, the big numbers there, right? I don't know how many of those are chatbots or, or are actually providing any level of quantum computing. But what I thought was maybe we can go next to Dusty for a little bit more, of your thoughts in terms of, where do we stand today with AI?
Yeah, Don, I've mentioned this to you before. First, I wish it was not called artificial intelligence. It's an old term, which seems to indicate that machines are about to take over. I prefer the term that Mark used, augmented intelligence, a little while ago, which sounds more like augmenting human intelligence or brain power, right? And we are all familiar with the hype that was started around 8 to 10 years ago. This is the third hype cycle for AI, by the way. Gartner was the previous one in the 80s, and there was one in the 50s. So now you have the third hype cycle, which really caused a lot of disillusionment in the healthcare and life sciences arena. Gartner calls this the trough of disillusionment, and we are kind of there right now for the initial hype. But I think we are making progress in coming up with some real applications. And look, for any technology, there is always a little bit of hype. And in this case, driven by the tech companies, the hype was just unprecedented. Now, if you go back to 2003, when Francis Collins and Craig Venter announced to the world that they have completed the Human Genome Project, right? The comments, if you look back at the headlines in New York Times or Wall Street Journal, it talked about solving the mysteries of life, and by 2010, we're going to eradicate cancer. It was similar, in 2012, 2013, 2014, when, all these companies that jumped into the fray, mostly tech companies, and started talking about eradicating cancer and winning the war on cancer and whatnot. And now I think we are at a stage where the hype's getting mitigated. We are coming up with some real applications, and we are still not where we need to be, anywhere near where we need to be in clinical care. So if you take a population, right, of 330 million in the US, right, let's say roughly 10% of them need care on a daily basis. So that's around 30 million. And if you ask the question, for how many of this 30 million people is their care guided by AI, the answer is a small, minuscule number, maybe 0.001% or something. But AI is taking root more among the translational and the operational processes, where it should be. It should solve the easy problems before it starts tackling cancer. And it's still pretty low in clinical care, but that's what this decade that we are in is going to see the transformation in.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to a lot of those statements that you made, Dusty, and I think we oftentimes seem to underestimate just the overall challenge that's ahead of us, right? It's just amazing to me that, whenever we see the technology, we get anxious about, what it might be able to do. But at the same time, especially in healthcare, I mean, there are a lot of different challenges that you have to overcome, many of which we'll touch on today, I think, in the overall discussion. So next, Yannick, so give us your lay of the land in AI today.
I think the argument that this last hype wave is kind of over is spot on. I think we're increasingly looking at a more pragmatic landscape of industrial scale use cases that work quite well, that have spawned a large number of not similar but similarly inspired application cases. And I think a lot of these, the statistics that you shared, they are very similar but applied to different use cases. And that's a great outcome, actually, because you have to first understand what actually does work, what can you build upon, and how can you then improve. And I think one of the things that we have identified as a problem and that needs to be improved is that AI is good at solving very narrow problems that have been trained on high volumes of data that are almost artificial problems, and the algorithms that solve these problems don't know what they're solving or why they're solving it. So they're largely blind to the context, which prohibits these systems to become useful in a lot of day-to-day situations, because the reality just is profoundly more complex than what we can currently cover with training data or with modeling algorithms and modeling the decision space itself. So I think we're on the verge of that shifting, and that will likely maybe in the next 10, 20 years will open up more let's say end user opportunities for AI. So I think that sums up where I think we are with what's currently possible, what has been proven, what's yet to be done.
Yeah, so if
I may jump in for just a second and reiterate what Yannick just said, that clinical burnout is a huge issue today among clinicians. And if AI can reduce the clinical burnout among physicians, and that's where the focus really should be at this early stage, not unraveling the mysteries of complex diseases right away. We're working towards it. But if you can reduce the keyboard time for clinicians, use machines to detect errors, harness data to improve outcomes in clinical decision support, and give clinicians and patients back the gift of time, that should be the initial goal. And Eric Topol and others have talked about this. And just wanted to reiterate what Yannick said. It's so true.
It's perfect. Even mundane things like documentation and making sure that the next few steps in the line aren't human tasks anymore, because they don't. If we're honest, they don't have to be, and that we can probably design systems that do a lot of that and just allow physicians to invest that time into the relationship with patients, or just give them time back to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, I'll make a little comment. I mean, I think again to the point about what can we do to augment clinicians, to the point that Yannick and Dusty made. I think is really where we'll see the most sort of bang for our machine learning buck, as it were, is really in the business that I work in now, Icometrics, we're using machine learning and AI to really augment the radiologist, to read MRI scans more accurately, more quantifiably, more quickly, not to take decision making away from clinicians, but to augment them and make them scalable and make them, be able to spend more time with the patient, because they're not, poring over an MRI scan looking for a lesion, or counting lesions by hand. So I think that's where we'll see the most opportunity, and I think the most adoption, because it's then AI isn't seen as threatening, it's seen as just another tool that I can use to, because as humans we're great at making tools and using them, right? So this is just another tool to help me in my daily work, like a stethoscope is, or we're always augmenting clinicians with robot surgery to and laparoscopic surgery and so on. They're all tools that I think help them deliver better patient care, which is what we should be focused on.